Also, a new development to talk about this morning, causing some concern and, leaving people scratching their heads. A tiger at the Bronx Zoo tested positive for coronavirus. Researchers believe she caught it from a zookeeper. The zoo has been closed, but the keepers are there tending to the animals. So now experts say people infected with the virus should stay away from their domestic pets while they isolate. So joining us to talk about the way that this transmission would happen and, kind of what it means as we're digesting about the virus, there's so much still to learn, is animal expert and PhD zoologist, Dr. Gray Stafford. Thank you so much, Gray, for checking in with us this morning. I imagine you were also quite surprised to hear this.
I was. The news broke for us in the zoo community late yesterday when the CDC and the USDA put out this notification that this tiger indeed had tested positive for the coronavirus. Several of the animals at the Bronx Zoo, large cats, that I should say, lions and tigers, were showing signs of respiratory illness about a month ago. And thanks to some veterinary researchers around the United States, including the folks at the Bronx Zoo, they tested this one tiger, they anesthetized her. They were able to get the culture swabs through the nasal area and through the back of the throat. They may have drawn blood too, I don't know. And it turns out this cat did test positive for the COVID-19.
So is it typical for a virus or even a bacterial infection to be able to be transmitted through regular behavior between animal and human? It makes me think a little bit of the valley fever, because that's something we talk about with our dogs to look out for. Obviously, we know that people have that as well, but it's not that they're passing it one to the other. They're just showing similar reactions to the environment, right?
That's an excellent point, Olivia. And I want to make it very clear. There's no evidence that suggests that humans are transmitting the COVID-19 to their pets at home, to their cats and dogs. This was an isolated case in a zoo, and what it tells us is that some species are more sensitive to being infected than others, and that's not unusual. We've seen that time and time again with West Nile virus and other diseases that have made their way across the U.S. around the world. And what it means is we have to take greater caution when working around them, just as we do now with great apes. Right now, if you work with a great ape like a chimpanzee or a gorilla, you're going to be masked up, you're going to use gloves and all that PPE that we heard so much about simply by interacting with them. Because they're so closely related to us, it's very likely that the kinds of illnesses we're susceptible to can infect them. And so that kind of precaution has been in place in zoos and aquariums for decades.
The reason why we know this, of course, is because of those zookeepers and caretakers and doctors who are there at the Bronx Zoo still working, even though we know that New York is just in the grips of the worst of this pandemic. What can you tell us about some of these facilities all across the country and across the world? They must show up still for the animals. So it's got to be a very challenging time for anybody who's dedicated their lives to keeping these animals safe.
It certainly is a challenging time. Thank you for asking that, because as you probably know, most zoo and aquarium facilities around the U.S. have already shuttered their doors, some for several weeks now. And yet keepers and veterinarians and certain key staff like life support technicians, maintenance and so forth have to go in because the animals eat every day, right? They have to be cared for every single day. And zoos, of course, depend upon their gate revenues, their public support. So this is a very challenging time, not just for human activities and small businesses, but for our zoos and aquariums. And all the valley facilities around the state have been affected by this. And the other concern, of course, is if someone is sick, like what happened at Bronx Zoo, now you've lost that expertise and someone else has to step in. And not everybody is qualified to take care of tigers or gorillas and so forth. So it is an ongoing challenge. It's one that we've covered on our podcast over the last month. But the great news is zookeepers and aquarists are some of the best employees, most creative people, most passionate people I've ever been acquainted with. And they will adjust to this challenge as they have in the past.
Yeah, the dedication is going to be tested, but I'm sure everyone's going to rise to the occasion. Dr. Gray Stafford, great to see you. Remind us the name of your podcast so we can check in.
It is called Zoo Logic. Thank you for asking.